Connor, and we're going to follow up on that blockbuster story last week. Senator Chuck Grassley releasing that unclassified, unredacted FBI document at 10:23. You remember this story. Let's take a look at the document. This is a 4-page detailed listing of all the information a confidential human source told the FBI several years ago about what appears to be a bribery attempt, if not a successful bribery campaign, of then Vice President Joe Biden, he's our president now, and his son Hunter Biden. Now, there's a lot to this story, and I want to unpack much of it. You'll remember, this alleges that an executive for the Burisma gas and electric company in Ukraine was willing to pay $10 million to the Biden family in exchange for favorable actions of the vice president on behalf of the U.S. government. Now, we know that then Vice President Biden did do things that ended up helping this company, Burisma. He's bragged about it, right? He strong-armed the president of Ukraine and got him to fire the country's chief prosecutor. That prosecutor, by the way, was actually scrutinizing and investigating executives with Burisma. Biden comes to town, strong-arms the president of Ukraine. They fire the prosecutor. Burisma's sitting pretty. Not only was this alleged bribe in exchange for that kind of favorable behavior, but also Burisma hired Hunter Biden to the tune of about $80,000 a month so that he could help Burisma navigate the shoals of the government and the financial institutions here in America so they could go public and make tons of money. It's the oldest game in the book, and it's not legal. So this FBI 1023 unclassified, unredacted document finally gets released by Senator Chuck Grassley against the will of the FBI, against the will of the Justice Department. Nobody wanted you to see this document. And, well, the mainstream media is continuing to try to keep this thing under wraps. In fact, I mean, you know about this story because you watch this program and you probably listen to talk radio and maybe you read some conservative websites that are really focused on it. But imagine if you were stuck just watching NBC News and reading the New York Times. You'd know nothing. You'd be in the dark. You would be completely uninformed. Want proof? Well, our friend Molly Hemingway over at The Federalist, she did a little thought experiment over the weekend. She went to the New York Times website and put in 3 words in the search engine. Take a look. She typed in Grassley, Biden, Burisma. Now, if I ask you anything going on with Grassley, Biden, and Burisma, you know exactly what the story was. But if you read the New York Times, look, the first hit you get is from June 5th. And the article isn't even about the scandal. It's about, well, you can see in the headline there, Republicans escalating attacks on FBI. See, the story isn't the scandal. The story is the Republicans are pouncing on this story. Completely uninformed. And so that's actually keeping a whole lot of Americans in the dark about this scandal. Also kept in the dark about this scandal, apparently, is the actual FBI and Justice Department investigators who were supposed to get to the bottom of a potential bribe of the Vice President of the United States. Take a look at Margot Cleveland's reporting today, also in The Federalist. Apparently, the FBI field office in Pittsburgh, they were given this 1023 document to look into, and they corroborated a bunch of the claims in that document. They corroborated a lot of the details, the names, the places, the dates, and they told the U.S. Attorney in Delaware that they had corroborated it. But nothing happened. There was no investigation of this document. Why? Well, that's what we want to talk about. Why indeed? Now, you'd be forgiven if you think that the FBI ignored this story and the Justice Department ignored this story and they buried it because they're putting their thumb on the scales of justice on behalf of their guy, a Democrat, Joe Biden. This is partisan, right? They just want to make sure they protect the Democrat and they hurt the Republicans at all costs. And well, there's a big part of this story that would, in fact, confirm that notion. I mean, just take a look at how they treated this confidential human source, telling them directly that they think Joe Biden got a bribe from Ukraine. They didn't do anything to really investigate it or move the investigation along. Meanwhile, the Steele dossier, which was a piece of opposition research created by the Hillary Clinton for President campaign, full of lies and misinformation, that the FBI took and immediately began a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. That led to an investigation of Trump as president. It led to the Robert Mueller investigation, and the entire thing was built on a fraudulent house of cards. The Steele dossier they took very seriously. They pulled out all the stops and they investigated, and leaked their investigation to the media to undermine Donald Trump. But this Biden bribery charge that actually had corroboration, unlike the Steele dossier, they just ignored it. They swept it under the rug. Why? Just to protect Joe Biden? Is he really worth that? Well, part of it is to protect Joe Biden, make no mistake, yes. But I think there's something bigger at play here. In a very real way, the reason that the FBI didn't investigate this, the reason that the FBI hid this story from the American people, the reason why Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, refused to allow Congress to look at this document, let alone release the document to the people. The only reason we see it right now is because Christopher Wray was personally threatened with contempt of Congress charges if he didn't release the document. The reason he tried to hide it was to protect himself and to protect the FBI. You hear it all the time from Christopher Wray, from Attorney General Merrick Garland. Hell, you heard it from James Comey, and you heard it from Attorney General Bill Barr. They want to protect the institution of the FBI. They're doing whatever they can to protect the institution of the Justice Department, and I believe them. That's exactly what they're doing. They are protecting their institution. The problem is that's not their job. You see, when they're sworn into office, they don't say, I swear to defend and protect the institution of the FBI and the Justice Department. No, they swear to defend the Constitution. And believe it or not, sadly, sometimes the interests of our FBI and the Justice Department is in direct conflict with the Constitution. Here's the latest example of that. A federal judge on Friday revealed that they investigated the FBI's conduct with regard to FISA 702 data. Now, this may ring a bell. This is the data that's caught up in a wide net of surveillance of the American people. It's supposed to be caught up so that when necessary, our law enforcement and intelligence communities can stop overseas terrorists from attacking our nation. And sometimes they do those searches without the benefit of a warrant. The secret FISA court oversees that, and Friday, a judge on that FISA court found that the FBI had conducted warrantless illegal searches. This is the kind of stuff that Edward Snowden revealed. It's this kind of stuff that James Clapper lied about under oath, and of course, nothing was ever done to him. We'll take a look at this tweet from our friend Sean Davis, also at the Federalist. The federal court in charge of overseeing how the intelligence community and the FBI uses this data found that the FBI illegally spied on a U.S. senator, a state senator, and a state judge. Did you hear about that story? I mean, it got covered a little bit, but boy, it didn't get much attention. Not nearly as much attention as Donald Trump having some documents down in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, what bothers you more, a former president with a box of documents, or the FBI actively using warrantless data to spy on a sitting U.S. senator? And here's the really scary thing. That federal judge, after discovering that, continued this program. The FBI can do it to you. They can do it today. They can do it right now. They are continuing to protect their institution. And it flies right in the face of our Constitution. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. And meanwhile, Joe Biden is a lion dog-faced pony soldier, to quote the 46th President of the United States. Yes, Joe Biden is a lion liar who lies. He obfuscates as well. He doesn't have a good relationship with the truth. He's full of balderdash and malarkey. He's a liar, and we've been detailing those lies quite a bit over the last several weeks, months. You know, we've got 50 years of lies to work with. But the latest one that is most important to his political future is this lie that he told over and over and over again in 2019 when he was trying to get the Democrat nomination for president. Understand something. It was a loaded field back in 2020, 2019, when Biden was trying to be the nominee. You had Kamala Harris, you had Elizabeth Warren, you had Bernie Sanders, you had Pete Buttigieg, you had a whole lot of candidates who were well-funded. And Biden, of course, he was old, he was a has-been, he was a joke, he was a punchline. And oh, by the way, his son was involved in a lot of overseas dealings that at the time, even Democrats were openly saying should disqualify him for the presidency. So what did Joe Biden say when faced with this existential threat to his political career, his legacy, and his ability to be president of the United States? He lied. Here's what he said.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period. And what I will do is the same thing we did in our administration. There will be an absolute wall between personal and private and the government.
Do you stand by your statement that you did not discuss any of your son's overseas business dealings with him?
Yes, I stand by that statement.
He stood by the statement. That's all he could say, right? He had to lie his way through the primary, and he ended up getting the nomination, and he had to continue to lie his way through right up till Election Day. That even after the infamous laptop story broke just about a month before Election Day. He lied, and he harnessed the power of the intelligence community and the FBI and the federal government to lie on his behalf. You'll remember the infamous letter from 51 intelligence community professionals who said that this Hunter Biden laptop has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. They censored it, they deleted it. If you put it on your Facebook page or on your Twitter feed, you got suspended. And that helped Joe Biden win the White House, where he sits today, overseeing a Justice Department and an FBI that spends most of its time investigating his chief political opponent, Donald Trump. Nothing corrupt about that, right? But let's get back to the lie. Now, there have been many instances over the last several years where this lie that Joe Biden never talked to his son about his business dealings has been completely blown apart. There's audio that was found on Hunter Biden's laptop where you hear Joe Biden leaving a voicemail for his son Hunter, telling him that he had seen a New York Times article about his dealings in China and everything looks okay, you're going to be fine. That's a direct conversation about Hunter Biden's business dealings. We also learned just a couple of weeks ago that Hunter Biden sent a text message to a business associate in China, a business associate connected to the Chinese Communist Party. And in the text message, he said, "I'm sitting next to my father on the sofa right now, and I expect you to wire me millions of dollars." And he did get that wire transfer, by the way, too. But Joe Biden, of course, claims that that wasn't accurate. He's calling his own son a liar, by the way, but that's a whole other story. Well, now we've got the latest revelation that shows that, in fact, yes, Joe Biden was lying, is lying, and will continue to lie about this to save his pathetic political skin. Here's the headline from Miranda Devine at the New York Post. Phone a friend. Hunter got Joe on speaker to impress his clients. Yeah. This is corroborated by Devin Archer, Hunter Biden's former business partner, who testified today, in fact, to the Judiciary and Oversight Committees about this very topic. In fact, the Oversight Committee put out a tweet about it that gives us all the details. Oh yes, with the two red sirens flashing, Joe was on the phone. In at least a dozen instances, Hunter put his father, then vice president, on speakerphone with his overseas business partners. In one instance with Biden associate Devin Archer, two Burisma executives explicitly asked Hunter, "Can you ring your dad?" So Hunter, being the big-time operator, would say, "Yeah, you betcha, hang on, let me get in." They'd actually get the vice president on the phone, on speakerphone, with the Burisma executives or with the Chinese executives, or whoever he was entertaining, for the $17 to maybe upward $25 million he made during those 8 years. And Joe Biden's voice was heard on the speakerphone, talking to his son about his son's business. It's lies. It's all lies. And frankly, if we can go back and look at the video of Joe Biden on the campaign trail in 2019, I want you to look at his eyes. Because they say that the eyes are a window to the soul. They say that when someone's lying to you, if you really focus, you can see it in their eyes that they're lying to you. So I want you to look at Joe Biden's eyes when he lies. Take a look.
But you, on the other hand, sent your son over there to get a job and work for a gas company that We had no experience before. I said nothing. In order to get access to the president. So you're selling access to the president just like he is. So
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that. No one has heard that.
I see it on the TV.
You see it on the TV. No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I don't like it up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on it, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's do this run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take Number two. No one has said my son has done anything wrong, and I did not on any occasion. And no one has ever said it. Now,
I didn't say you were doing anything wrong.
You said I set up my son to work in an oil company. Isn't that what you said? Get your words straight, Jack.
That's what I hear on MSNBC.
You don't hear that on MSNBC. You did not hear that at all. What you heard? Look, okay, I'm not going to get an argument with you, man.
Well, I don't want to.
Well, yeah, you do, but look, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
Yeah, that's enough. I'm not going to get into an argument with you. After shouting at him, calling him a liar, challenging him to an IQ test, challenging him to a push-up test, calling him fat and calling him too old. That's how an innocent man behaves, isn't it? You know how I know the walls are closing in on Joe Biden and his lies right now? Well, just look at Chris Christie yesterday when challenged on this issue.
So many legal issues in this campaign, and I want to ask you about one involving the president's son, Hunter Biden, who's going to appear in court this week to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and will enter into an agreement that could avert conviction on a gun-related charge. The deal has infuriated many congressional Republicans who are holding their own hearings, and I wonder, after this plea happens, if you would advise your party to move on.
No, I wouldn't, Margaret, and here's why. The conduct here by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware and by the Justice Department is just can't be justified. It doesn't take 5 years, Margaret. As you mentioned, I was the U.S. Attorney in the 5th largest office in the country for 7 years during the Bush administration. It does not take 5 years to investigate 2 misdemeanor tax counts and to dismiss a gun charge. And we need to know what they were investigating and why these are the charges they concluded to. This is not just any person. This is the son of the President of the United States. And while justice needs to be equal, it needs to be equal. And it doesn't appear to me that this is the way to do it. And I would say one thing on the gun charge. I mean, this is a case where Democrats yell and scream for more new gun laws in the country, yet you hear no Democrat yelling about the fact that Hunter Biden intentionally lied on his gun.
That is something else. You know, Chris Christie is usually one of those Democrats who's constantly defending the Justice Department. He's an apologist for these guys. He'll always find a reason to protect his friends in the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Joe Biden, when you've lost a stalwart Democrat defender like I'm sorry, what? Wait, he's a Republican? Oh, I regret the error, but you understand the point. There's more to come on O'Connor 2. A landmark day today in the tech world. Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter.com, made a stunning announcement on his own Twitter feed. It was a 3-second video. This is what it said. The bird goes away, replaced by X. In fact, the headquarters for Twitter.com in San Francisco looked like this last night as this huge change took place. That's right, Twitter.com is now X.com. If you go to X.com, it routes you right to Twitter. Boy, by the way, how much must that have cost? Just to purchase the URL of X.com. Someone else must have owned it, right? So Twitter.com is now X.com. What does that mean exactly? Well, according to the CEO of Twitter, she put out a tweet that explained this. Her name is Linda Yaccarino. She said, X is the future state of unlimited interactivity. centered in audio, video, messaging, payments, banking, creating a global marketplace for ideas, goods, services, and opportunities. Powered by AI, X will connect us all in ways we're just beginning to imagine. What the hell does that mean? I feel like I'm in someone's living room and they're trying to explain some sort of multi-level marketing plan to me, and I'm sorry, I don't want to buy that soap. I just want to buy the soap I'm used to buying. No, but you'll get rich if you just buy it this way. No, Jim Hansen has forgotten more about social media than I'll ever know, and he joins us now. You seem to be all on board with this X thing.
Well, I mean, what's the choice? You know, it's not like, no, I'm going to refuse to acknowledge that they changed the name.
Here's Jim Hansen. I, for one, accept and welcome my new X overlords.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Elon is the man. No, I look at it like this. He said he was going to do it for a while, and apparently he got a wild hair. What they haven't quite figured out is what they're going to call all this stuff. What's a tweet now?
Right.
Is it X? You know, what are we? We're not tweeps. We're not anything else. I don't know. There's a lot that you can do when you're the richest man in the world and you just decide, no, I'm going to do it tonight. Why? Because I said.
By the way, what does this do to our Salem Media Group town hall website known as Twitchy? It's one of our most popular websites, part of the Salem group. And it's all about tweets and what people put out on tweets. We got the bird as part of our logo, Twitchy. It's all obsolete now.
Hey, I was way ahead of the power curve because I saw he was starting this last night. And I have the Freebird Alliance was previously our kind of trade group.
I remember.
To negotiate with Twitter to try and get them to stop throttling conservatives. And last night I changed it to the Free X Alliance and used the new logo and did a video this morning. So I'm way ahead of the power curve. You guys are going to have to be Twixy. You're
a lemming is what you are. Twixy. I'll put
that
in the suggestion box down the hall.
Lemming.
All right, so let's really talk, because this is more than just a rebranding. Yes, the bird is gone. Although, wait, before we get into the more than just rebranding, why rebrand in the first place? He spent, what, $40 billion on this thing. Part of what he was purchasing was a well-established, internationally known brand. That blue bird means something. It's like changing the golden arches. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Again, I don't want to second guess literally the richest man in the world, but that's a hell of a lot of marketing and brand recognition clout that you're just tossing.
Yeah, and it is crazy until you look at SpaceX and X.AI, which is his AI company, and he's building a conglomerate. Yeah. And so he had to fit this in the conglomerate. And the real values he had in Twitter was a 300 million person user base and all the historical data of that, which he can use to train AI.
Right.
So he's got a massive thing. Was it crazy? Of course it's crazy. It's Elon Musk. He does crazy.
Well, and you make a very important point here. He purchased a user group. He purchased a user community that is very engaged. If you use Twitter, or X, I guess we're calling it now, you probably use it multiple times a day. I mean, Hansen, you live on the space for the most part. You and Schlichter, it's like you don't even talk to your wives, and you both have pretty hot wives. So if you listen to what the CEO said, let's bring her tweet up again, because this is actually incredibly illuminating. The CEO of Twitter says this is going to involve audio, video, and messaging. We already have that. Payments and banking, creating a global marketplace for ideas, goods, and services. So in other words, there's a huge financial aspect of this. He basically sees everybody who's using this website now for sending out messages, sharing articles, maybe even creating original content. He sees it also as a giant marketplace for transactions, for buying and selling stuff like eBay, or for banking like Venmo. Is that what we're headed to?
Absolutely. And what he got is he got those 300 million users and all the companies that previously were using Twitter to send people to their products. So if you wanted to go to Venmo, Venmo's Twitter might send you there. If you want to go to Amazon, you went there through Twitter. Now you don't have to leave Twitter under this new plan. What they're going to do is give you the opportunity to have some form of currency. I'm not sure how they'll do it. They may do crypto. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. What they'll have is the ability for companies to market directly so that the customers now don't leave the platform, and the advertising revenue goes up, the money sharing goes up. You know, there is a cunning plan in the midst of Elon's insanity.
one ring to rule them all. I mean, does this not make you a little uncomfortable thinking that people will have their banking transactions, payment transactions, social media contacts? People can be entrepreneurs and build their own subscription base and their own creative marketplace, all in one place, all resting on the shoulders of one man. This has got Bond villain written all over it.
Isn't it awesome? Here's the thing. If there's so many of these instances already. Look at Google. 92% of internet searches worldwide are answered by Google, which means they control everything you think, find, want to know, or do. Google gets a chance to filter before you get a chance to learn a thing. So to have a competitor to that, to me, is a bonus. If he's going to take apart Facebook and Meta and Google and the rest of those guys and at least provide competition, and Amazon and eBay, I want that. I want more competition. He won't win it all, but having more is better.
All right, let me, again, because I tend to be a fan of Elon Musk. I think that he marches to his own drummer, and more often than not, I agree with his perspective on things, I find. And by the way, I do, full disclosure, drive one of his fancy American-made electric cars. Not to save the planet or anything, just because it's kind of a kick-ass car. But that being said, Elon Musk, after he made his money as one of the partners of PayPal, every single thing that he's done since then, whether it's Tesla or SpaceX or other various major money-making schemes, he's always done it because he's made a partnership with the federal government. He got, right? I mean, is he one step away here? It's like corporate welfare, right? The reason people bought all those Teslas at the beginning is because they got tax breaks because Elon Musk properly lobbied the people in this town. So is he going to be in bed with the government, with Twitter or X now?
Well, look at one of the first things he did. The first thing he did was to release the Twitter files, which showed how the government was conspiring with Twitter to censor opinions and voices they didn't like. That's unconstitutional, and he put himself and the rest of his businesses at risk by releasing those files and painting a target on himself, saying, we're not going to do that. Now, he hasn't delivered the free speech he's promised. This free speech, not reach policy they have says, we won't suspend your account if you say something that the left doesn't like. We just won't let anyone see it. So that needs to change, but at least he took on the government censorship first thing. I like that.
Maybe he took him on, or maybe this is like your classic mafia move. It's like, gee, you know, it sure would be a shame for me to show everything that I know, so maybe you need to step up. I don't know. We'll see. I don't mean to be cynical about this.
Somebody has to.
I want him to be successful. I don't like things being too big, Jim Hansen. You know that.
I know. And this has the potential to be as big a conglomerate as anybody has attempted, given the things they laid out. So I don't want them to succeed at that level, but I do want them to succeed in being a competitor, in broadening the marketplace, and at least deliver us the free speech you promised, Elon, or you may lose everybody.
All right, that's Jim Hansen, and he's all in on X.com as long as they actually deliver. Well, if Tucker is all in, that's a good sign, I think, right?
There you go. Yeah, he's the lead dog, and they got to play nice with him.
All right, Jim
so
Hansen,
we'll see what they do.
Also co-host of the Warlords podcast with our pal Kurt Schlichter. Thanks, Jim. Good stuff. There's more to come. Don't delete me, Elon. I drive your car, for God's sake. I'll even go on your rocket if you want. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Kamala Harris is really worked up over a history curriculum down in the state of Florida. She was shouting about it. She's so agitated. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
Wow, she is shouting really loudly, so it's got to be true, right? I kind of miss when she just talked about Venn diagrams and yellow school buses. Okay, so what's really going on down in Florida? Are the citizens of Florida really putting into their curriculum an instructional lesson that teaches middle school kids that enslaved Africans brought here against their will in horrific conditions, experiencing the worst atrocities, not just enslavement, as if that wasn't enough, but the murder, the rape, the dehumanization, that in some way benefited these people? Well, of course not. Charles C.W. Cook is the online editor of National Review, and he actually looked at the entire curriculum, did a search on any term involving slavery or enslaved or slaves. There were 191 references, and out of all of them, this appears to be the one offending statement. Instruction includes how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Well, that's not exactly what Kamala Harris said at all, is it? Well, that's okay. We're going to clear all this up because earlier today, Whoopi Goldberg, who of course, as you know, is a bit of a historian herself, she took to The View and told us exactly what was wrong here.
Trying to get through everything that's happened over the weekend and what's all the insanity going on in the world. Like Wednesday, Florida's Board of Education approved what they're calling standards for African-American history. I feel like they didn't talk to any African-Americans because we could have told them about the history, and nor have anyone seemingly gone to the Smithsonian to find out anything. You know, there are all of these former slaves who have given their testimony. You can go to the Smithsonian and hear them. So apparently they all think...
Goldberg thinks that the problem in Florida is they didn't actually talk to any African Americans, let alone African American scholars, to create their African American history curriculum. Well, let's get to the bottom of it then, shall we? Let's hear from the person, one of the people who was in charge of creating this curriculum. Let's see what this crazy right-wing white supremacist has to say for himself.
So there's been a little bit of backlash to these standards that were put out, and like you said, that these were done in open sessions so the public could listen or watch along. What would you say to critics who say these standards have set education back?
Well, I can't answer critics whom I haven't seen or heard. The only criticism I've encountered so far is a single one that was articulated by the vice president, and which was an error. As I stated in my response to the vice president, it was categorically false. It was never said that slavery was beneficial to Africans. What was said, and anyone who reads this will see this with clarity, it is the case that Africans proved resourceful, resilient, and adaptive, and were able to develop skills and aptitudes which served to their benefit, both while enslaved and after enslavement.
Wait a minute. That appears to be an African-American scholar who's responsible. Are you telling me that Whoopi Goldberg got it wrong? Are you going to tell me that Whoopi Goldberg doesn't know what she's talking about? That's not possible. I mean, she's one of the hosts of The View. She's got an EGOT. Yeah, that is, in fact, a professor of African-American Studies. He's a professor emeritus at Michigan State University. He was very much responsible for forming this curriculum, and you just heard from his own mouth. That's an interview with ABC News, by the way, where he says the vice president got this completely wrong. Let's hear a little bit more from the actual gentleman who put together this curriculum.
So you would say that you're standing by these standards, even though the vice president was very verbose yesterday.
Well, I will repeat to Mr. McCarty that I'm not claiming authorship, but I'm certainly willing to stand behind the work of my members in the task force and to stand behind the collaborative process. I have read, of course, all the standards. I am quite confident in their validity and their historical accuracy and their motivations and intent.
Wow, so he's standing by them. This is This is really awkward for Vice President Kamala Harris, isn't it? I mean, we saw her shouting and screaming and getting very agitated, saying that they're being lied to, that they're gaslighting African Americans in this country. And here we've got this guy whose ancestors come from slavery, who in fact shared a personal anecdote about his own legacy, his own family members talking about slavery. Here, listen.
Amid all of this, that do you think the wording should be amended?
I do not. No, I think it would be effectively to erase people's history. And let me illustrate that for you, if I may. My great-grandfather is someone who came from the islands and who was enslaved here, and whose own resourcefulness, resilience, and adaptiveness was certainly instrumental in producing for his family, his descendants, the ability to prosper here in this country. Hence, from his resourcefulness, we derive benefits. I think anyone who would try to change that language would be denying that great-grandfather Sidious made any contribution. I certainly could not endorse doing that.
Now, of course, Kamala Harris, I guess, could draw on her family legacy and her great-great-grandfather to find out what his perspective may have been on slavery. Now, we could draw from her great-great-grandfather who came from India and lived in India, but that obviously wouldn't be analogous because this is about enslaved Africans here in the United States of America. So we'd have to look at the other side of her family tree. But unfortunately, that side of the tree also doesn't have enslaved Africans because that side of the family comes from Jamaica, and well, reports are that in fact her family, well, they weren't the enslaved, they actually participated in the ownership of slaves. So it's interesting to hear Kamala Harris so agitated and so upset about us and we and our legacy, and they can't do this to us, when she's not actually one of us when it comes to the horrific legacy of slavery in this country. But she does know one thing, one very important thing about politics. When you're a Democrat, when you're on the left, and you start screaming racist at people like Ron DeSantis or any Republican for that matter, well, it doesn't matter that the curriculum was actually created by an African-American scholar who specializes in such things. No, 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 no. You start pointing fingers, you start screaming racist, you start getting agitated, and you start saying that white people are just trying to erase the legacy of slavery in this country, well, you end up raising a whole lot of money and creating a whole lot of power for yourself. And that's really what this is all about. It's certainly not about the truth. Hope we cleared that up for you. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. But it was a really big weekend for Hollywood. You had the Barbieheimer effect, right? Everyone was going to see Barbie or they're going to see Oppenheimer, and they did. In fact, it was the 4th highest grossing weekend of all time. Now, a lot of that is because the prices are more expensive than they've ever been, but Hollywood doesn't care. They're making money. And yes, Barbie ended up doing blockbuster business. Oppenheimer, pretty good as well, with I think about $80 million in box office receipts. That's all great stuff. Good for them. But the real story of the weekend in Hollywood has to do with a film that we've talked about quite a bit here, The Sound of Freedom, from Angel Studios, starring Jim Caviezel. We had an exclusive interview with James Caviezel last week. Great feedback on that interview, by the way, and we talked about how this movie got made, why other studios didn't want to touch it. And boy, oh boy, are people responding to this movie. Now, Barbie was gonna be a huge hit, because you couldn't go anywhere without seeing hype for this thing, right? You saw marketing, you saw advertising, you saw posters, you saw pink everywhere. Every single network, every single cable network, they all did their special little exposés on Barbie and how Barbie world is going to take over the country. And, well, let's face it, they got a very pretty blonde actress dressed in skimpy little pink outfits in Margot Robbie. And whenever you see that on the screen, it catches people's eye. Not to mention the fact that the Barbie brand and the Barbie doll has been around for, what, 70 years now? That's a whole lot of women who were little girls playing with dolls who were ready. They were primed. They were going to buy their tickets. That's a whole lot of hype and a whole lot of media to support that opening weekend. So of course they did well. They also didn't get coverage like this that Sound of Freedom got. Here's the Rolling Stone. To know thousands of adults will absorb Sound of Freedom, the vigilante fever dream, and come away thinking themselves better informed on a hidden civilizational crisis. It's profoundly depressing. Worse still, they'll want to spread the word. The headline for that review, Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. That's not a good review at all. Bloomberg also gave Sound of Freedom the ugly treatment. QAnon and Sound of Freedom both rely on tired Hollywood tropes. Sex trafficking movies routinely skip over some very important questions, which gives the conspiratorial right room to run wild. I'm sorry, what very important questions do we need to be asking and answering about sex trafficking other than how evil are these people? That's really the only question that any normal human being needs to ask. So there's Rolling Stone, there's Bloomberg. We had the same thing from CNN, we had the same thing from CBS, we had the same thing from most of the people in the media. If they covered Sound of Freedom at all, they covered it in a way that intimidated people who might be interested in the subject matter, painted everybody into a corner of conspiracy theorists, and they basically tried to pre-shame anyone who had any interest in seeing the movie. If anything, the pre-movie hype for Sound of Freedom was designed to keep people from buying tickets, to keep people from going to see it, the opposite of what we saw with Barbie. That's why what I'm about to show you is incredibly extraordinary. Now, last week we told you that Sound of Freedom was on the brink of surpassing $100 million in gross ticket sales in its 4th week of release. We've already told you that on July 4th, Sound of Freedom beat the Indiana Jones movie that had a multi-$100 million budget. But what I'm about to show you blows all of that away. Here's the weekend receipts for this weekend. Number 1, as we mentioned, Barbie, $155 million gross. Number 2, first week on the charts, Oppenheimer, $80 million. And then look at that, number 3. Not Mission Impossible, who just debuted last week. Mission Impossible debuted last week. Go ahead and bring it back up here, because we've got to look at these numbers. Mission Impossible debuted last week with over $100 million in sales, and this week, in its 2nd week, drops down to 4th place. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, it's grossed $159 million, as you can see on the far right column, but it's already in 5th place now in its 6th week on the charts. There's number 3. There's the 3rd highest grossing movie of the land, only behind Barbie and Oppenheimer, with those millions of dollars in budget. Sound of Freedom now close to $125 million. It's the little movie that could. It's the little movie that is flipping Hollywood on its head. It's the movie that you were told you shouldn't see. They actually shamed you if you thought about seeing it, but you're not paying attention. You're following your heart, you're following your mind, and you're following your friend's advice because the word of mouth was extraordinary. The Sound of Freedom is Hollywood's feel-good story of the year, even though the actual plot doesn't feel good at all. There's hope. There's hope for Hollywood as long as movies are made outside of Hollywood. That's it for tonight. There's more to come tomorrow. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.